what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we are bringing it back to our X-Men series rewatch of films with
Dark Phoenix.
Now, technically, this is my first experience with the movie, so it's not actually a rewatch, but it is finishing off the marathon of films that I started a few weeks ago, and I have been having a pretty good time with all those movies up to this point. Some of them I loved, some of them not so much, but the experience itself has been positive overall, and I'm glad to finally have watched Dark Phoenix, which was released to digital today, and you know what? I didn't hate it. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it, which was one of the biggest things I was worried about when watching this movie. A lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about Dark Phoenix, and I can understand where you're coming from. But there has been much, much worse when it comes down to this universe alone, when it comes down to how movies are made. This movie's not bad. It's competent enough. But we'll get into it. So what's this movie about? Well, Dark Phoenix is basically a reimagining remake of sorts of X-Men The Last Stand. It's all about Jean Grey turning into Dark Phoenix. So some people want to stop her, some people want to save her, and there's some other people very interested in her gifts as a whole. And I don't want to talk too much into it because I feel like I'm going to spoil something, even though I feel like I won't. The nice thing about this movie is there's a few shout-outs in it that I feel like were obvious to people who are a fan of X-Men The Last Stand. A few shout-outs, a few scenes that feel very, very reminiscent of things that happened in The Last Stand. It's like, hey, I understand you, I respect you, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And I respect that about this movie. Now, first off, let's talk about some of the good things to be found in this movie, because I do think there are quite a few things in this movie that are good. First and foremost, this is a very spectacular movie to watch. Just like the rest of the prequels, it's very visually compelling. There's a lot of great visuals, a lot of great action. I like the camera work, the cinematography. It's all very well done. Technically speaking, it's probably my least favorite when it comes down to the musical score, but that's not really the most important when it comes down to the behind the scenes category. In general, there's not a lot to hate actually about what this movie looks like, how it feels. Now, a lot of people hate the costumes that these X-Men wear because they prefer what they were wearing at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, and I can understand where you're coming from. Those were kind of cool costumes, but I actually like the costumes in this because it reminded me of Cyclops' costume in X-Men Evolution, and I loved X-Men Evolution. So when I saw these X-Men wearing these costumes specifically, it made me smile. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't as good of costumes as the people wore at the end of the last movie, but I have nothing against the costume, okay? I also like that they focused a lot on Jean Grey's character, on her character development, because that's one thing that the X-Men Last Stand failed on. Jean Grey was the most interesting character in that movie, and she was in the background for some reason. They just wanted to focus on the Cure side, and I didn't care so much about the Cure. The Cure was interesting, but I wanted to see more of Jean Grey, because she was awesome in that movie. Also, I have no problem with the story in this movie. I'm not sure about the execution, but the story itself is fine. I just think they might have been playing it a little bit too safe, because I feel like they were trying to avoid repeating what The Last Stand did, and because they played it safe, I feel like they failed on a different level altogether. These are the main positives that I found in the movie. They're not spectacular. They don't make the movie fantastic. They don't make this movie so great that I want to see it immediately again. They don't. But I'm pointing them out because I'm saying it's not all bad. There are things in this movie that I appreciated, that I liked watching, that were fun to watch, especially when it comes down to the visuals and the action and everything like that. However, it does have faults. It has flaws. First and foremost, from the very beginning of this movie, I didn't believe any of the characters, any of their acting. It felt indifferent. I don't know why. I didn't feel any emotional connection with any of these characters. I felt like they were all very much indifferent as to what was happening, even though what was happening was incredibly emotionally impactful, or it should have been, yet they were just like, oh my goodness. Really, man? And that's a huge disappointment, especially when it comes down to James McAvoy. James McAvoy is an incredible actor. He's always impressed me. Same with Michael Fassbender. He's done a great job in the series thus far, and yet they're just pawns in a chess game. They're playing their role fine enough. They're doing what they're supposed to do, but I just don't feel them. I don't feel what they're doing. I don't feel their performance. It's like everybody is so exhausted in these roles, in these movies, that they don't want to make another movie, yet the producers are pushing them to make another movie. And they're like, okay, I guess I'll put on the suit and do my thing. That's another thing. Look at Mystique, and look how she's transformed over the years. She looked exactly like Mystique in the original series. And now it just kind of looked like they put some blue watercolor on her face and some stickers for those things. Called it a day and it was done, and she just doesn't look like Mystique, and she doesn't really feel like she's trying that hard anymore. Everybody just seems so exhausted in this movie, like they didn't want to do it. Had these people actually tried hard to play their roles in an expressive way, the movie would have been 10 times better. Also, the extra characters that are interested in Jean Grey's ability. I don't want to get too deep into who they are or whatever. Technically speaking, that could spoil you, but at the same time, I felt that they were 100% unnecessary. They didn't need to be there, and every time that they showed up in the movie, I was like, just get on with it. I want to see the Jean Grey story. It was kind of like The Cure in The Last Stand. I didn't care so much about that, just wanted to focus on Jean Grey. Yes, they focused more on Jean Grey in this movie, but it still wasn't enough. I feel like those unnecessary characters that were thrown in there in this movie were specifically a conduit to make it safe for Jean Grey, to make her less destructive. And that was another problem that I saw with this movie. She was not as destructive as the Jean Grey in The Last Stand. She had her moments, yes, and there's a lot of visually stunning stuff when it came down to her specifically, but she's supposed to be breaking down in this mental state that we're supposed to feel for, and I just never did. And I hate to say that because I love Sophie Turner in Game of Thrones. I know she has it in her. I just never felt it with her performance in this movie specifically. That being said, I still consider this to be an X-Men movie. I still think it feels like an X-Men movie. It's still action-oriented like a lot of the X-Men movies are. The characters aren't always the greatest, or the performances aren't always there. But in a way, it successfully feels like a final chapter in an X-Men universe, which is something that I wanted to see. So what did I rank this movie? 78 out of 100 possible stars, 78%. It was made competently enough. It had some really great visuals. As far as an X-Men movie, it did feel like X-Men. It felt like a final chapter, which is what I wanted. It had some problems here and there, so it's not the best X-Men movie ever. However, it's okay. As for where I rank this in the X-Men universe of films, you'll have to wait to see my ranking video on my channel, so check that out if it's up. If it's not, you'll just have to wait to see when it comes up. I don't know. Tell me what you thought of this movie in the comments down below. And as for YouTube, make sure that you hit subscribe, like it, and hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!